Dexter Morgan is not known for showing his real feelings, but there has been times where it's happened, like the death of one of his closest companions and the time he was outplayed. So today I'll go over the 10 times Dexter showed emotions, starting with one of his more emotional outbursts. Number 10, Miguel's betrayal. Dexter's reaction to Miguel Priedo's betrayal was a complex mix of emotions. At first, he felt angry and disappointed because Miguel was one of the few people he had truly opened up to and trusted with his dark passenger. When Miguel goes against Dexter's code by killing Ellen Wolf, it hits Dexter extremely hard because Dexter had broken his own rules by trying to have a real friend and teaching Miguel his methods. But all he got in return for that was betrayal.
He used me.
There is also a sense of regret as Dexter realizes he should have seen the warning signs earlier. Miguel didn't respect the code and was simply using Dexter's teachings to justify his own desire to kill. The betrayal reinforced Dexter's belief that he couldn't really have true friendships. The situation became even more personal when Miguel tried to have the babysitter of Rita's children killed to get to Dexter. This crossed a line that made Dexter realize Miguel had to die. During their final confrontation, Dexter expressed his deep sense of betrayal, telling Miguel he had broken his trust and that their friendship was a lie.
I had higher hopes for you, for us, but I finally just have to accept it. I'll always be alone.
It was a major moment that made Dexter even more cautious about letting people get close to him. This whole arc with Miguel served as an important lesson for Dexter about the dangers of trying to share his dark secret with others, even with those who seem to understand him. Number 9, Little Chino. But his feelings of betrayal were nothing compared to his feelings of defeat. Dexter is an extremely efficient killer, which means that he rarely has to deal with mistakes. But when they occur, like in this case, they are always costly. Little Chino was notable for being physically imposing. Despite the first part of his name being little, there's nothing little about him. He is described as being around 6'8" and 300 pounds, which made him stand out among Dexter's usual targets. He was a Nicaraguan gang enforcer who killed multiple people, including a young boy whose father came to the police for help. Dexter decides to target Chino but is unprepared to handle the beast of a man. Dexter's first attempt to kill him failed because Little Chino was so physically powerful that he broke free from the plastic wrap restraints that Dexter typically uses on his victims. Little Chino escaped and survived, and this initial failure really frustrated Dexter. It was a moment in the series that showed Dexter as not only the calculating killer he claims to be, but also someone who can experience weakness and frustration. So far we have seen Dexter angry, frustrated, and defeated, but from here onwards things will get more personal. Up until now, Dexter hasn't found any reason to be jealous over Rita, but in Season 4, Episode 11, Hello Dexter Morgan, Dexter turns a little green when he finds out from Masuka that his neighbor Elliot not only cozied up to his wife, but even kissed her. He gets jealous, but doesn't even understand the emotion.
I kissed Elliot.
What?
At first, he's not sure what to do with the situation. After running around all day trying to gain the upper hand in his struggle with Trinity, he comes back home to see Elliot sitting on his porch. Dexter thinks about going inside and leaving the issue alone, but something moves him to talk to Elliot while Rita watches through the window.
Stay the hell away from my wife.
Jesus. Dex. Wow. Okay.
Don't ever touch her again.
Rita makes a comment about not being angry. Instead, she was glad that he cared enough to punch Elliot for kissing her.
Not mad.
What are you?
Glad that you cared that much.
While he didn't act on his true violent thoughts towards Elliot, the incident helped him realize he had developed real feelings for Rita beyond just maintaining his normal guy cover and made him more aware of what she and the kids meant to him. Number 7. You remember now?
You remember now?
Pliny.
The revelation that Brian was Dexter's long-lost brother shocked viewers and Dexter himself to the core. It was a profound moment that made him question everything about his identity and past. Before this revelation, Dexter thought he was alone in being the way he was, but suddenly he learned that his darkness had a genetic component. He and his brother had both become killers after witnessing their mother's brutal murder.
We're blood brothers, through birth and death. Watching Mom die? It's amazing that we survived that, isn't it?
Brian represented what Dexter could have become without Harry's code, a pure killer without any moral constraints. There was also anger and confusion about why Harry had separated them and never told Dexter about his brother. He struggled with the realization that while he was taken in by Harry and taught to channel his urges through the code, Brian was left to grow up in mental institutions. The revelation forced Dexter to confront his own nature and choices. Brian wanted Dexter to embrace his true self and abandon Harry's code, offering a tempting vision of freedom and brotherhood.
He taught me a code.
Like an absurd avenger.
It's not why I kill.
You could be yourself around me. You need to embrace who you are now.
This created an intense internal conflict for Dexter between his biological family connection with Brian and his loyalty to his adopted family, particularly Deborah, ultimately leading to one of the most emotionally charged decisions of his life. But that's not the only time he had to make an extremely difficult decision. Number 6, a friend does a hard thing. Dexter is overcome with emotion when he has to say goodbye to a good friend. Camila is a close friend of Dexter's and is also a dear friend of his parents. In Season 3, Episode 6, La Huerta tells Dexter about Camila's rapidly declining health due to lung cancer. Wasting no time, he rushes to see Camila in the hospital, ready to attend the needs of his friend. Camila is obviously in massive pain, but she manages to crack a smile for Dexter. For a couple of days, they go back and forth about finding the perfect key lime pie, and eventually, Camila tells Dexter what's really on her mind. She wants to end her life, but can't because she's Catholic, so she asks Dexter to do it for her. The sorrow we see in Dexter's eyes at that moment is so profound, so different from the killer who claims to have no emotions. He doesn't want to, but after a talk with Miguel, who tells him that a good friend does the hard thing, he goes ahead and injects sodium pentothal into Camila's pie so she can pass easily.
You finally brought me the perfect pie.
Everything about this scene is bittersweet. From the key lime pie that Dexter uses to end Camila's life to how he feels when he decides to let his friend go, even when doing so goes against his code.
I'm doing a good thing, aren't I? And why does it feel so bad?
After all, a
And
friend
does
does
the
a hard
hard
thing,
thing.
if it benefits the other friend, no matter how painful it is. What's even more bittersweet is how the perfect key lime pie was the one that granted her wish of death. Number 5, hello Dexter Morgan. But Dexter doesn't just feel pain, he can also feel fear and panic. Dexter's double life was always a house of cards waiting to crumble, but it almost happened when he least expected it. Throughout the show's 4th season, Dexter and his colleagues try to catch the Trinity killer. Of course, Dexter, who always solves things quicker than others, finds Trinity's real identity, Arthur Mitchell, and approaches him under a fake name, Kyle Butler. Dexter has many opportunities to end Trinity but chooses not to because he finds him interesting. This would end up being one of his biggest regrets, but we'll talk more about that later. Dexter's web of lies is ripped apart when Trinity shows up unexpectedly at Miami Metro. The moment their eyes meet from across the room, Dexter jerks up from his chair in fear and panic. But nothing is more chilling than the moment Trinity says,
Hello, Dexter Morgan.
Then and there, Dexter realizes how stupid he was to play games with Trinity, especially since he had a family outside Deb.
He knows my name, occupation. He can find out about my family. My family. What the hell have I done?
This represents a disastrous collision of Dexter's two worlds, his public life as a forensic analyst and his secret life as a killer pursuing Trinity. It's crazy how one killer's world can be shaken in the presence of another. Number 4, I'm fond of her. Throughout the show, we hear Dexter repeat to himself over and over again what a terrible emotionless creature he is. Of course, if you have made it this far into the video, then you understand that he's not being completely truthful here. But this thought was nailed into his head by his father Harry and stayed with him. But Dexter has emotions, and he finally admitted to having them when Deb faced danger at the hands of Brian, aka the ice truck killer. Brian tries to convince Dexter to kill Deb. stating that she is the reason why he holds his true nature back. But as Dexter looks at Deb's still body on the table, he says to his brother while staring at Deb lovingly,
I can't. Not Deb.
Oh, no, don't say that.
I'm very fond of her.
You can't be a killer and a hero.
When Brian tries to kill Deborah, Dexter quickly defends her against him, and what he does next is so drastic that his love for Deb can never be questioned. Number 3. You're not a trophy. After rescuing Deborah from Brian, Dexter knows his brother will try to kill her again. He sets up a trap for him which Brian falls into and knocks him unconscious. When Brian opens his eyes, he finds himself in the same position as he put Deb in. And the following scene shows us the moment Dexter made the hardest choice of his life. Brian asks Dexter if he is one of his victims, and Dexter says sadly,
You're gonna collect a little sample of Barney's blood for your slide collection.
You're not a trophy. You need to be put down.
Uncharacteristically, Dexter touches his brother's forehead with his in a moment of sorrow as though he were apologizing, and then he ends his brother's life.
Sorry.
The expression on Dexter's face is one of pain and regret. Even though Dexter chose to kill Brian to protect Deborah, it still affected him deeply. After all, Brian was his biological brother, and quite honestly, the only person who truly understood and accepted his dark nature. All the moments we've listed and analyzed so far have shown how deeply Dexter can feel emotions, but none can compare to the moment Dexter found Rita dead in the bathtub. In the finale of Season 4, Dexter faces immeasurable loss when his wife dies at the hands of another serial killer called Trinity. As he sees his wife's body submerged in a tub full of her blood, something in Dexter visibly dies. He looks at her like he can't believe his eyes, and you can see the exact moment he dissociates from his surroundings. He doesn't show the emotions people expect him to, but it's clear he's simply just in shock. His moment of emotional release comes in Season 5, Episode 1, when he enters a bar and randomly kills an innocent man. He looks into the mirror and sees his father standing behind him. He says he thought he had left him, then crumbles to the floor and lets out the most heart-wrenching scream you would ever hear. Dexter's pain and sorrow are also mixed with regret at not killing Trinity the first opportunity he had, and this amplifies the cocktail of raw emotions going through his mind. But there is one more moment in the show that shows Dexter even more emotional. Dexter's reaction to Deb's death in the series finale was devastating. It was perhaps the most genuine emotional response we'd ever seen from him. After Deb was shot by Oliver Saxon and later suffered a blood clot that left her in a vegetative state, Dexter faced the loss of the person who meant the most to him. In one of the most powerful scenes of the series, Dexter disconnected Deb's life support, wheeled her body out of the hospital during a hurricane evacuation, and took her out on his boat. He gently dropped her body into the ocean, a stark contrast to his usual ritual of disposing of victims. This was the first time we saw Dexter truly break down, showing raw grief rather than his usual calculated demeanor. Fans speculate that the reason he threw Deb's body into the ocean was he considered her a victim. Not a victim because he killed her, but because he saw her death as a consequence of how he lived his life. The loss of Deb was what ultimately drove Dexter to fake his own death and exile himself, becoming a lumberjack in Oregon. Her death seems to be the final blow that convinced him he could never have a normal life or maintain connections with people he loved without putting them in harm's way.